fresh print is on your screens. You're watching the Reddit Herald, your ultimate guide to Reddit's wildest headlines and juiciest threads. Today's lineup is hard to believe and impossible to unsee. Let's dive in. The heart monitor's completely flattened out at exactly 11:47 p.m. We're talking about a room packed with heavy hitters here, a top-tier cardiologist flown straight in from Boston, a neurologist with 3 decades of experience under his belt, and a critical care doctor who prided himself on never throwing in the towel without being absolutely certain. But right then, all 3 of them walked out of that room. The family got the call. The endless hospital paperwork got started. The night nurse went ahead and dimmed the lights. By the time midnight rolled around, the most powerful and influential man in the entire city was officially declared dead. But by the next morning, everything had completely turned upside down. And let me tell you, it wasn't because of those high-priced specialists, some fancy medical equipment, or any official hospital protocol. No, it was all because of a little 3-year-old girl wearing a pink dress. In the middle of the night, she had snuck in, pressed her tiny little hand right against an unconscious man's face, held her teddy bear tight against his chest, and just started talking to him. You know how toddlers do, with that quiet, total confidence that whatever they're talking to can hear every single word. And it was also because of her mother, a woman who had been mopping those exact floors for 9 long years. By the time the sun came up, she realized that the most important thing she'd ever done in that building had absolutely nothing to do with a mop. Before we really dive into this story, let me ask you, what do you think about this? Do you believe that the smallest, most overlooked people in this world are sometimes the ones carrying the greatest gifts? If that strikes a chord with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to Kindness Tales, and share this with someone who could use a little faith in something today. The guy on the bed was named Roman Hale. He was 58 years old and had spent the last 30 years building a massive real estate empire that stretched across 4 different continents. If you picked up any financial magazine, they'd describe him as a visionary, relentless, and a tough guy to deal with, pretty much in equal measure. Honestly, Roman never argued with those descriptions, he knew exactly who he was. He had one daughter, Sarah. She was the only person on the face of the earth who would look him in the eye and argue with him without worrying about the fallout. Roman had landed in the hospital 11 days earlier after a major heart issue. His housekeeper was actually the one who caught it and reacted so fast that the paramedics later said her quick thinking was the only reason the guy even made it to the hospital alive. Funnily enough, she'd taken a basic first aid class the year before but never mentioned it to a soul, she just didn't think it was something worth bragging about. For the first week, things actually looked pretty manageable. But then, a second medical crisis hit. Those 3 specialists gathered out in the hallway, picking their words very carefully to explain to Sarah what was happening. She just stood there and took it, not letting a single emotion show on her face. See, she'd learned a lot of things from her dad, but the biggest lesson was that a room full of people will read your face long before they ever listen to your words. She finally headed home around 2 in the morning because the night nurse, a kind woman named Mernetta, whose name was written neatly on the whiteboard next to Sarah and Elisa, gently told her that she needed to get some rest if she was going to survive this. Mernetta was almost right about how the night would go. But not quite. Enter Ada Wren. She was 34 years old and had spent the last 9 years cleaning the 4th floor of that hospital. On the side, she was slowly chipping away at a nursing degree, taking it one single exam at a time, balancing it around grueling night shifts and raising a kid on a budget that required her to watch every single penny. Her little girl was named Lily. Lily was 3 years old, had her mom's deep, dark eyes, and possessed a totally unique way of looking at the world. Because she grew up surrounded by adults doing serious, heavy work, she had picked up this incredible, calming presence, the kind of stillness most adults spend their entire lives searching for. Ada would bring Lily along on her night shifts whenever the hospital's family break room was free. The 4th floor supervisor, Marguerite, was a 21-year veteran of the building and had a perfect sense for what actually mattered and what rules could be bent. A 3-year-old sleeping peacefully in a portable crib in the break room? That didn't need any official paperwork. But if you know anything about 3-year-olds, they have their own ideas about staying where they're put. Somewhere just after 2 in the morning, Ada went back to check on her daughter and found the crib completely empty. The door was wide open. She bolted into the hallway, moving with that fast, efficient stride you only learn after 9 years on the night shift. She found Lily just 3 doors down. Now, the door to Roman Hale's room had a stiff latch that had been broken for a week. It was on the maintenance to-do list, but nobody had gotten around to it yet. Lily had just thrown her entire body weight into it, with the pure determination only a toddler chasing a destination can muster, and pushed it right open. And there she was, right on the bed. She had scrambled up there the way she climbed everything in sight. She was curled up right against the dying man's side, holding her teddy bear flat against his chest. Her tiny hand was resting gently on his cheek, holding it there so softly and intentionally that, in the dim light of the room, it looked like the most deliberate, purposeful thing in the world. She was just chatting away to him. Not shouting or anything, just in that quiet, steady, completely unhurried voice she used with her stuffed animals when she thought she was all by herself. Standing out in the doorway, Ada couldn't quite catch the actual words, just the vibe. It was this totally relaxed, absolute confidence of a kid talking to someone she knew for a fact was right there. Ada just froze at the entrance. Now, she knew she should have rushed in right away and grabbed her. She knew that. But she just stood there anyway for almost a whole minute. Later on, when she tried to make sense of why she didn't move, she counted those seconds. The best way she could explain it was this: there was a feeling in that room that just felt like it shouldn't be messed with. Not because of any hospital rules or logic, but because of how incredibly still and heavy the air felt. You had the flatlined monitors, the dim lighting, and a 3-year-old with a teddy bear talking to an unconscious man like it was the most natural, necessary thing happening anywhere in the world right then. And then, the monitor shifted. It wasn't some dramatic, movie-style jump, just a tiny little change. A rhythm that had been totally flat started doing something a bit different. Now, Ada wasn't officially authorized to read those screens, but after 9 years of watching them on that floor, she knew what she was looking at. To her, it looked like that machine was searching for a heartbeat to latch onto. That's when she finally stepped inside. But she didn't yank Lily off the bed. Instead, she sat down in the chair right next to it, placed her own hand gently over her daughter's tiny hand, the one resting on the man's cheek, and she just stayed. She sat there for 2 whole hours. Before we go any further, I want to take a quick second to pause. Because we need to talk about what had been quietly keeping Ada afloat long enough for her to even be in that hospital on that specific night. See, there was this daycare director named Dora. For over a year, Dora had been letting Ada pay her tuition 2 weeks late, never once making her feel bad or guilty about it. She'd just tell her that things always have a way of working out and that she trusted Ada completely. Then there was Dr. Ferris, a physician who worked the day shift on the 4th floor. For 3 years, he'd been rescuing nursing textbooks from the library's discard pile and leaving them on Ada's cleaning cart. Every single book had a little sticky note inside that just said, "Thought this might be useful." And we can't forget the parking lot attendant, Otto. One winter, he watched Ada show up soaked to the bone 4 mornings in a row. Lily had gotten sick because Ada refused to spend money on the covered parking garage, because back then, paying for a roof over her car meant she couldn't afford Lily's antibiotics. Otto walked up, handed her an access card, told her it was just a spare, and quietly renewed it for her every 6 months. None of these people knew each other. None of them had any clue they were links in a chain. They were just ordinary folks who noticed someone struggling and made a small choice to help. But that exact chain is what put Ada on the 4th floor that night. Ada being on that floor is what put Lily in that hospital room. And Lily being in that room is the one thing that absolutely nobody has been able to explain since. That's what this whole story is about. What would you do in this situation? Do you think these little moments of tracking kindness are just coincidences? Because around here, we believe that impossible miracles almost never happen out of nowhere. They're carried to us by a long, quiet line of everyday people doing small, ordinary things that add up to something nobody could have ever planned or predicted. At exactly 4:23 in the morning, Roman Hale moved his head. Ada immediately hit the call button, and Renetta rushed in just 40 seconds later. She took one look at the monitors. Then she looked at Lily, who was fast asleep against the man's side with her teddy bear still pinned to his chest. Finally, she looked at Ada. She asked, "How long have you been in here?" Ada just replied, "About 2 hours." Renetta checked the monitors one more time. Then she told Ada she needed to call the rest of the medical team in and asked her to take Lily back down to the break room. Ada carefully scooped Lily up into her arms. Lily made a little sleepy sound, squeezed her teddy bear a bit tighter, but didn't really wake up. Ada carried her down the hall and just sat with her in the quiet family room until the sudden rush of the medical team moving through the floor signaled that everything had changed. It took 4 days, but Roman finally opened his eyes. It happened in stages, like a guy slowly swimming his way up from the very bottom of a deep ocean. By the end of the week, he was staying awake for hours at a time. On a Tuesday afternoon, he looked over at Sarah sitting right next to his bed and spoke his very first clear sentence. And true to form, it was just as blunt and direct as he'd always been. His very first words to her were, "I'm hungry." Sarah just burst out laughing, the kind of deep, relieved laugh she hadn't let out in 2 whole weeks. Later on, while he was recovering, Roman started asking about what exactly went down on the night of the 4th. So, Sarah laid it all out for him. She'd actually tracked Ada down right in the hospital hallway to ask if she had a few minutes to talk. Ada gave her the straight, honest truth, apologized for not pulling Lily out of the room immediately, and even said she'd completely understand if she got fired or faced some kind of consequences for it. Sarah just looked at her for a second, and then asked what Lily was doing when Ada walked in on them. Ada told her she had her hand right on his cheek, just talking away to him. Curious, Sarah asked what Ada thought the little girl was saying. Ada sighed and said, "Honestly, I don't know. She talks to everything, her teddy bears, the house plants, the pigeons outside on the sidewalk." Sarah smiled quietly and said, "She thinks everything in this world can hear her. And hey, maybe it can." Naturally, Roman asked to meet the little girl. That meeting happened on a Thursday morning. Lily walked into the room wearing her pink dress and holding her teddy bear. She looked around at all the heart monitors, the tubes, and the heavy medical gear, and she wasn't fazed by any of it. She climbed right onto the bed with that exact same total determination she had the first time, pressed her teddy bear against his chest, and looked him right in the eye. She just said, "You look better." Roman Hale, a man who hadn't shed a tear in front of another human being in over 20 years, just stared up at the ceiling for a long moment. Then he looked at her and said, "I feel better." She patted his cheek twice with her tiny hand, looked around the room, and asked if there was any juice. And you bet they got her some juice. Roman then turned to Ada and asked her straight up what she needed. This wasn't some big, flashy show of generosity, it was a real, genuine question from a guy who fully intended to do something about the answer. Ada opened up about her nursing degree, the 2 final exams she had left, the steep costs, the lack of time, and how childcare completely fell apart whenever she tried to hit the books past 10 o'clock at night. He asked how long it would take her to finish if all those roadblocks vanished. She told him a year, maybe even less. That afternoon, Roman made 4 phone calls. Now, he didn't do it to give her a free pass. Ada didn't want things handed to her, she just wanted them to be possible. There's a big difference between those 2 things, and she made that crystal clear to him. Roman got it right away. He'd built his entire empire by understanding the difference between clearing a path and doing the actual walking for someone. As it turned out, the childcare, the study programs, and the exam financial aid were already out there. Ada had been eligible for them the whole time, but she just didn't know because nobody had ever told her, and she was too busy working to find out. Roman's calls didn't magically invent new resources, they just connected Ada to the help that had been sitting there waiting for her all along. 4 months later, Ada sat down for her first exam. She aced it. 3 months after that, she took the final one. The day the results came in, she was out in the hall pushing her cleaning cart when her phone lit up. She froze for a second. Then, she walked into the empty family break room, sat down, and just took it all in. Mernetta walked in and found her there. She looked at the phone, then at Ada's face, and knew instantly what it meant. She sat down right next to her, gave it a second, and said, "I always knew you'd do it." Ada smiled and said, "You didn't even know me when I started this." Mernetta replied, "True, but I knew who you were by your second week here." The moral of the story. Roman once told Sarah, "I still don't know what that little girl did in that room." Sarah just looked at him and said, "Honestly, Dad, neither does she. She was just there." And Roman nodded and said, "That's the whole point, isn't it?" "Yep," Sarah agreed. "That's the whole point. So, let me leave you with this. What did this story teach you? If you ask me, it teaches us to never underestimate the person pushing the cleaning cart down the hallway. Never underestimate her daughter, either. Never underestimate what 9 years of quiet, hard work looks like from the inside, or what it can pull off when it shows up in the right room at the exact right moment. And definitely never underestimate a 3-year-old kid who talks to everything because she believes the world is listening. Because sometimes, it actually is. If this story touched your heart today, please hit that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and share it with someone who could use a lift. Don't forget to subscribe to Kindness Tales for more stories about courage, quiet dignity, and the small human choices that end up mattering more than anyone could have ever guessed. Because the most important thing that happened in that hospital on the night of the 4th never made it into any official medical report. It was just a child's hand on a man's face, and a mother who stood in the doorway and had the wisdom not to interrupt.